Oh, yeah.
Is that why maybe it looks different? I mean, that it only did the background stuff, so it's
Yeah.
good.
That's okay. I mean, it just
Yeah.
takes some of the
Okay.
warmth, color, temperature, fixes, stuff like that.
We
I'm
both
not really
yawned
yawning.
at
I'm just,
I thought you were doing it at the
I was
same
just being
time.
dumb. Okay. I think this looks good.
Let's go.
This is going. Yeah.
What did you call it? Cultivating persistence. What?
For your creativity. Welcome to the pre-show.
Yeah, we're still getting our stuff together.
Thanks for tuning in. Yeah, we're just setting up. I'm gonna jump in here in a minute. Oh, I need to put the thing on.
Do we have the ability to see the chat?
Yeah, it's gonna show up here.
Oh, okay. I was confused.
Yeah, it actually I don't think we need to do the.
Oh, the main one. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, it's an update to their
their dashboard.
dashboard. Yeah, it's kind of nice. I think this actually works too, as like you might be able to share this or embed it somewhere, and people can watch the live stream like from your website or something like that.
Oh, cool.
It's pretty nice.
Yeah.
All right, I gotta find the opener. There it is. What a day.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Do we want to talk about stuff or just keep it light?
Probably keep it light.
Yeah, let's keep it light. Everything's fine.
Life is wonderful.
Yeah. No, we truly are doing great. Just booked a trip for our 20-year anniversary.
Yep.
Which is in October, but to take advantage of the deals, we scheduled it for September. And probably what's going to happen is we'll go and we'll do our trip.
Want to do something else.
We'll be like, but it's our anniversary, and we'll go out. We'll go out and see a movie or something, or maybe eat at
have a weekend
special.
Without kids or something.
Yeah, that'd be good. So I'm excited.
It's been a long time since it's just been you and me. Going somewhere.
Oh, well, so I was actually talking about just like the idea of like this relationship is about to be 20 years old.
It's 20th birthday.
Or not the marriage.
Yeah,
the relationship actually turned 20 in December.
Yeah.
Or November.
Of
we
last year.
We were dating for a month.
Yeah.
Before I proposed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, what's that story? A month? No, we knew each other for a long time before that, though.
Yeah, so November this year, our relationship will be old enough to buy drinks.
There you go. Congratulations, us.
Yeah, congratulations. All right, well, let's go ahead and jump into today's topic. I'm going to go ahead and kick this thing off. You ready?
Yep.
I'm gonna wait actually until the
trash guy.
The trash, yeah. It's.
Yeah.
Maybe we should. I don't know. I don't want to push the show back.
Mm-mm. I mean, we could have it a little earlier.
That might be changing though, because we just got a letter from the HOA saying that everybody has to use the same trash provider.
Do they have to?
I think so.
Oh, that's kind of.
I might be wrong. But we already have.
I thought it was like opting in.
We already have this one. They got a discount though, like a discounted rate, and so I'm like, I want to check and be like, hey, we've been really loyal.
Yeah.
And with you.
It's also a woman-owned business, and that's why we originally got started with them. So.
Yeah. Beep, beep. You guys probably can't hear it, but it's so loud behind us.
Yeah, you just don't want it to come through.
Mm-hmm.
It's all good.
All right. I think we're good. Here we go. Hello and welcome to In the Boat with Ben and Rachel. I'm Ben.
And I'm Rachel.
And this podcast exists to address common creator struggles and provide weekly inspiration for your creator journey. So, most people aspire to create things their whole life. Maybe they say they want to write a book, or they want to write songs and release an album, or they want to start painting, or they want to start some other creative thing. And most people aspire their whole lives to do something and never get started.
Or they never finish.
So I was going to say, the next step into that is some people start, a lot of people start, but they never finish. They never actually get to realize their creative or artistic vision. Mm-hmm. Very few people actually see their creative endeavors through. Mm-hmm. And one of the main ingredients that comes into play is persistence. And so that's what I wanted to talk about with today's episode, is the role of persistence in creativity, and how do you cultivate that, mm-hmm. so that, and really the ultimate goal, it's like, not being a persistent person for persistence sake.
Yeah.
But so that those things so that you're not on your deathbed saying, I wish I had done this. So that those aspirations you have, you actually get to realize and see the fruits of. Mm-hmm. I still have a huge list of things that I want to get to, but I'm also in a place in my life where I'm looking back on all of the things that I've created.
We've created a lot together and separately.
And I feel extremely grateful, mm-hmm. That I was able to complete those things. And it mm-hmm. just brings me, it just brings me a lot of joy looking back at those things, seeing things that exist now that didn't exist before, that I got to play a role in bringing into the world. So anyways, I thought it would be good to talk about that, and to maybe talk through some of our experiences and tips to help people realize their creative dreams.
Yeah.
Just, light stuff.
I mean, it could get a little heavy maybe.
Yeah.
Creative work is hard work.
So it is. And to that point, let's talk about what persistence is, because the reason many people don't get started or don't finish something is because of how challenging it is. Mm-hmm. It's creative work is hard. And when you share, we've seen a lot of examples of people sharing their creative work and it being torn apart by critics, it being rejected by the intended recipient. And so it's like, why put yourself through that? Why risk that? Mm-hmm. So it's really easy, as much as we might want to make something, to create something, there are so many reasons why it's just easier not to. Yeah. And it makes it easy to let years go by and you never get started on something. Mm-hmm. So persistence is the thing that you employ that fights against all of those reasons, that helps you take the steps to make the thing in spite of those things. Not you got rid of all of that risk and there's nothing but, good things on the other side of making things, but it's, I'm going to do this anyway. Mm-hmm. Even oftentimes in the face of hitting those places, like you're actively being rejected,
like one after another.
Yeah, your work is actively being torn apart. people are actively trolling you. And
Mm-hmm.
I haven't, to be fair, like I haven't experienced a lot of this, but I know the culture online can be pretty harsh, really
I've
harsh,
experienced a
harsh
lot
for
of
creators.
it.
And you have definitely experienced a lot of it, so
Yeah.
we can get into that.
Yep.
Is there anything else you would add to kind of the definition of persistence, or
I
what
mean,
does it
for me,
mean
it's
to you?
kind of just like seeing things through, um, not wavering in what, I mean, yeah, you will waver, but just in the midst of wavering, knowing that you need to see it through, you know. And I'll talk about like how I do this
Mm-hmm.
and connecting it to a greater, purpose. But yeah, I think you had a good definition of persistence. I think about our kids when I think about persistence and how they'll ask a question and the answer is no. And then they'll ask it a different way and the answer is no. And then they'll ask it a different way and they'll just keep going. And that's what I think about when I think about persistence. It's like every time you're shut down, you find another way to go about it,
Yeah.
until you reach that other hurdle and then you know.
You know, so I'm glad that you kind of brought up our kids, because that's one of the first places I wanted to go. Um, Persistence, I think, can be something that is built into you, that is kind of nurtured into you as a young
Yeah.
person. And so you, um, in a couple of different ways, for some people, it's they were told they couldn't do something, and they decided,
They're going
well,
to
I'm
prove
gonna
it
I'm
wrong.
gonna
Yeah.
show you.
Yeah.
Um,
I think that was me.
Other people, maybe in a healthier
Yeah.
childhood environment, were told not necessarily you can do anything you put your mind to, but saying you have potential, and if you decide to do something and you work at it, you can make something amazing.
Mhm.
and and that message was reinforced, and they were given the room to have creative freedom and explore those
Mhm.
things. um, and and even though I had a challenging childhood, I was encouraged a lot by my parents, by other
Mhm.
adults in my life, to explore and cultivate my creativity. There, I was rewarded, for being creative by, well, and there is, it's possible that this can also be unhealthy, but like
Attention
a
and
feeling of acceptance,
yeah.
attention, a sense of belonging.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, and that is kind of the tricky thing, because
Mhm.
that can also come from an unhealthy place, to feel like, oh, I'm not special, or I don't belong unless I'm making
Mhm.
something that brings other people joy. Um, yeah, so I think there are a lot of ways that it can be built into you as a child, but I think that's a great starting place for anybody who has aspired to do something, who's wanted to do something, and maybe feels like they're blocked, feeling like they can't get started, or they don't finish, to ask themselves, okay, well, what were maybe some of the things in my childhood
Mhm.
that created limiting beliefs, or um, that are blocking me right now as an adult, and to really explore those things. I think that's a great first place to look.
Well, and also this is a little bit of it's not quite on topic, but as a parent, I know how annoying it can be when your kid is like so persistent. And I know I've
Mm-hmm.
said before, wow, you guys are so persistent. And it doesn't sound like a good thing, So I don't know, going back to them and saying, you know what, persistence is a really good trait to have. And we need to cultivate that in the right way.
Yeah. So let's dive into that a little bit, because I find that really interesting. Because how this, we're kind of setting this episode up as like cultivating it inside yourself, but I think
Mm-hmm.
it's also, if you have people in your life who are persistent, who ask a lot of questions, who are very curious, who I think of the way some of our kids will insert themselves and kind of jump into conversations and want to contribute something.
Mm-hmm.
And these things are genuinely annoying and sometimes inappropriate and and often overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
And I think those things can be true, and that those tendencies can be positive traits. I think both of those things can be true at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Well, and what I was going to say is when we're exploring it from our childhood, maybe thinking of it from the perspective of our parents too, and how annoying it may have been when we asked to do something and the answer was no, and then we,
Yeah.
continued pestering and, you know, so it wasn't that they were trying to break the persistence in us. It was just that a lot of the times parents are just overwhelmed.
And we have more tools, we have better language
Mm-hmm.
to so and still, like, even with those things, it's very difficult, like what you mentioned, going back to the kid after the fact. This is where I think a lot of, like, the best parenting comes in, is not that you have a great habit of always responding perfectly, but that you're really good at going back, at following up to
Mm-hmm.
situations where,
Fix things.
yeah, fix things. um yeah, and that's a whole other topic,
Yeah.
but in this case, like, what they're doing is overwhelming you, it's annoying you, it's frustrating, and you respond in the moment in a certain way. And what you mean to communicate and what actually comes out are often different things.
Mm-hmm.
And so, fortunately, we know that we can go back and we can say, you know what, I I really love how persistent you are. I like that you are constantly thinking about different ways you can ask the question, and how creative that is, and that you're using problem solving. When you do that in this kind of scenario,
Mm-hmm.
and talk about, like, the actual context of when it happened, it's really overwhelming for me. And so when I said, however I said it, I didn't mean that you shouldn't be persistent. I meant that in this scenario, it really overwhelms me and makes me feel like I can't
Yeah.
handle it. I think that's super valuable. So then, what are those things that we as kids needed to hear as a follow up that
Yeah.
we didn't get a chance to because our parents didn't really know any better?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a good question to ask.
Yeah. I like that you brought in that real world context. I think that's super helpful.
Yeah.
So they're also kind of related to that. Um, I think of it as two different things that we're kind of fighting against. We're fighting against some of the external voices and how we internalize that. Um, and really, the reality is we're fighting one thing. It's the internal narrative.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that internal narrative is built from external things and experiences.
Yeah.
Um, so being aware, I think, of the external voices that are feeding your internal narrative. So that, starts obviously in childhood with your parents and other influential adults in your life, but
Mm-hmm.
that continues um, into adulthood when you think about the kinds of things you listen to and the people who you look up to in your life, and the people who, like, your bosses or your managers, or um, and so I think it's good to continue looking outward at those things and asking, okay, like, what are the things that people are saying
Mm-hmm.
that are having an influence on the story that I'm telling myself about whether or not I can actually do this thing.
This is like deep internal work.
Yeah.
Like I, I know you and I have talked about this because we're both in therapy and working through like childhood wounds that we still have to work through even as adults, and thinking about the ways when you have a wound of some kind, your whole it's like a lens that you see everything in your life through. So if you've seen through that lens for 20 years or 30 years, there it just reinforces those wounds and those voices,
Mm-hmm.
which affects our persistence. Because I mean, depending on what the wound is, like for me, one of the things that I always felt as a kid is that I was just too much. Like I talked a lot, I had a lot of stories to tell, and um, people would get annoyed because of how often I told these stories, and it wasn't for attention. It was just that like I was bubbling over with creative things to say, and I needed a place for them to go, you know? And so there were, when you see through that lens and you see like, oh, I'm too much, it kind of makes you step inside yourself and wall off a part of who you are,
Yeah.
which affects like how well you can, how well you cultivate persistence. Because as soon as you hit a roadblock that reinforces that thing that you think about yourself, or it's going to be like, oh, I can't do this.
Yeah.
This is too much.
Yeah. And it really, it's sometimes, I feel like in some ways when it's really like, I tell the story about a science teacher we had in 6th grade who told the athletes in our class, statistically, none of you will ever play in the NFL.
Yeah.
And that kind of blatant, like, but there are also some like really subtle ways
Mm-hmm.
when people are talking about, being practical,
Mm-hmm.
meaning well,
Yeah.
trying to,
What are you going to do
trying to
for
look
money
out.
though?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
those kind of things that are really, really sneaky. And so, um, yeah, just kind of doing a, not an inventory,
Yeah.
an audit. I like that
Mm-hmm.
word better. Not doing an audit of what are the voices,
Mm-hmm.
what are the little sound bites, those things that have kind of fed into that internal narrative.
Yeah.
And then, you know, I think a natural place to go from there is to really ask yourself, okay, when I think about doing something creative that I've been putting off, what story am I telling myself?
Mm-hmm.
What are the thoughts that pop into my head that become the basis for not doing it?
Not getting started at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it helps a lot. You talk a lot about journaling and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think it helps a lot to actually write those things down.
Mm-hmm. Well, and to have a response to them. I mean, this is what my therapist has told me.
Yeah.
Like, write it down and then have a counter response that's like, no, I am not too much because, and then you have something to look back on if that's reinforced when you hit your first roadblock. A big one too, like I think for both of us, is like, I am not enough.
Mm-hmm.
And, looking at, I don't know, just like you said, doing the audit and having that as one, and then having a counterpoint that speaks to all the reasons we are enough and that we do enough, is really helpful because the thing about, and this is what I was going to get into, the thing about creative work is that it's like up, down, up, down, up. I don't know if this is for everybody or if it's for like people like me who struggle with depression and anxiety and all of that, but it's like one week you're the best creator ever, and then the next week you're like, what am I doing? I can't, I'm terrible at this,
Yeah. Yeah. So there is a reality to sharing creative work that you have to accept.
Mm-hmm.
And before you make something, um, it's perfect. before you actually create the thing,
Yeah, in your
however
head.
however it
Yeah.
exists in your mind and how
Mm-hmm.
people will respond to it.
I've written so many books in my head that are like New
Yeah,
York Times bestsellers.
it's perfect. Everybody loves it. It goes viral. It becomes something that you can retire on because it's so beloved.
Yeah.
And if you know, like you're doing this thought experiment as a part of when you think about the reality of what it means to create and share things.
Mm-hmm.
um, the risk is that it will end up not being that perfect thing that exists in your head.
Mm-hmm.
um, but rather than try not to think about that, I think it's really important to lean into that reality and to accept it, and to accept the idea that you will share many things. If you create, if you actually do work, you will share many things that people don't care about, that nobody finds interesting as much as you might love it, that people actively dislike.
Mm-hmm.
um, that is that is the reality. um, and so I think being able to accept that as like, okay, it's an expectation setting thing,
Mm-hmm.
versus hoping that for whatever reason it'll be different for you. um, but I think that keeps a lot of people from getting started too, because it's
Yeah.
like, well, I don't want to be disillusioned. I I actually like living with the fantasy that everything I will ever create is going to be perfect and wonderful. And as long as I don't actually make and share something, I can continue living in that fantasy.
Yeah.
That book that I keep saying, yeah, I'm going to write a book one day. It in my head, it's like it's an amazing book,
Yeah.
and if I share it, there's a chance that that will turn out not to be true, and I don't know if I can handle that.
Yeah.
Um, so
Yeah. And there are, of course, more practical reasons. Like, as far as writing a book, you just don't make the time, and you never get started. So I don't know if that's linked to persistence or just not, not scheduling and, excuse me.
so there's gosh, there's so many pieces to this. I think there's also the piece of, like, you think of a specific thing like writing an album. I'm actually wondering if this is a thing for me. I'm still working through it. But I've been saying for a long time I want to write an album of songs. But there's a part of me, there's a voice in my head that's saying you should do that. Because I've written music in the past. I've been, I am a musician. I have, uh, I've taken kind of a break from that, and I feel this kind of creative pressure almost of
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, that's a thing you should do, right?
Yeah.
Like,
To
it's
prove
overdue.
you're still a musician.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, and by focusing on that, the question I think that's good to ask is, by focusing on that, am I not leaving myself open for other things that I might actually love and want to do? Um, so it's almost like it's just this big thing that's blocking me that I don't really want to do, but maybe I feel like I should. Like I said, I'm still investigating that. But I think
Mm-hmm.
what's true for a lot of people is maybe they feel like they should do something specific, and they're not allowing themselves to consider other creative things. um, be like, they're not giving themselves permission to think about anything else until they get this thing done that they don't actually really want to do.
Mm-hmm.
They maybe just think they should do.
Yeah.
um,
And there is value in being persistent in doing things that you don't really want to do. Like, that's part of life. But when it comes to creative work, I feel like it needs to have a bigger purpose than that, than just I should do this, you know.
Yeah. So we've talked about dealing with some of the resistance and those, external and internal narratives. We've talked about, the possibility that there could be something that you feel like you should do that's keeping you from thinking about things that maybe you would actually be passionate about doing. We've talked about dealing with the reality of what it means to create and share things, and um, how much of a roller coaster that can be, and accepting that. But I think if you don't, it's one thing to accept that, but it's another thing to prepare yourself for that ride. Like, you don't go on a roller coaster and leave the restraints on off and be like, okay, we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Like, you get on the roller coaster, it's going to be a thrill ride. It's going to be scary. It's going to jostle you around, but you also put on the restraints, And so I think there are some things that we can do that help us manage the roller coaster. And that's kind of the next thing I want to get into.
Well, real quick though,
Yeah.
as far as like getting into a creative project, like say someone has already gotten started and then they never finish. And I feel like a lot of that has to do with how hard creative work is. And a lot of times before we even get started, we have a vision in our minds for it being an easy thing. So, for example, when I talk to people who say they want to write a book, they'll talk about getting started, and then it always hits a certain point where they're like, wow, I didn't realize it was this hard to do. Like, to put words down on the paper every single day in some kind of form or fashion that like links to each other and has story structure and all. Like, it's a lot,
Yeah.
and but I think sometimes we're just not prepared for how hard that is. And human nature is such that as soon as we hit a hard spot, we're like, oh yeah, I don't want to, this is uncomfortable.
Nope. Yeah.
I don't want to do this. I mean, I think about when, when people, I ran 9 miles this morning, and when people hear that, they're like, oh my gosh, I can only do like one, maybe. But it's like you learn to hit that point where you want to quit and everything hurts, and then you keep going.
Well, and when you're describing that, I think the thing that helps is, I'm going to keep going on this roller coaster metaphor, but like, talk to somebody who's been on the roller coaster,
Yeah.
and who's survived,
Mm-hmm.
who's finished the ride, whatever, and say, hey, what are the trouble spots, and let them describe their experience to you,
Yeah.
and then believe them. I think the tendency to think it's magical thinking,
yeah,
of like
that won't happen to me.
it's going to be different for me somehow.
Yeah.
What you can put your money on is that you will experience the same difficulty and frustration that other people have experienced.
Yeah. Every writer who has a book out has been rejected multiple times.
Yeah.
And that's hard.
Yeah. And so if you ask somebody and hear their experience and believe them and expect it, then it's not as much of, it's like, yeah, this sucks, but I also knew this was going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And you prepare yourself mentally for it. I think it's really the surprise and the shock and the disillusionment.
Yeah.
Like,
well, the unrealistic expectations.
I guess I'm not special. Cause
yeah.
So yeah, I think that can go a long way in helping people
Mm-hmm.
get through those trouble spots.
Yeah. That's all I wanted to say before you move on to something else.
Yeah. Yeah. So what you described about like writing things down and having a response, I think that's a really great tool to use to cultivate persistence. I think there's a lot that you can get from doing some of this work yourself, but I think what's also true is, like, people outside of you can kind of put you into that negative headspace, but also people outside of you can lift you out of it.
Mm-hmm.
If you can find people in your life who believe in you and who will encourage you when you're feeling frustrated, when you feel like your work is terrible, who uh, who will remind you of how important your work is and what it means to actually share it and get it out into the world. Having those people in your life is priceless. And if you can find those people, that can actually do a lot of the heavy lifting when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to working through those trouble spots.
Yeah. I have like four things that I usually, three or four things I usually tell writers when they hit those hard spots, you know? Do you
Mm-hmm.
want to hear them?
Yeah.
So the first is connecting with a deeper purpose, and I call it a mission. So, like, there is a mission that I have with the books that I write. And when you hit those hard spots and people are rejecting things, you can connect back to that mission and say, you know what, I'm still going to keep going because this is really important to me, you know?
Yeah.
And that helps with persistence in the face of rejection and all of those bound oh my gosh, I just lost it, the hurdles
Yeah.
that you face. The second one is believing in your worth, and this might take, you know, it might take journaling where you just write over and over and over, I am enough, I am good at what I do. I, you know, having those places where the weeks that you don't believe it, you can go back and just like, I don't know, it sounds
Like you read your own words.
yeah, it
It's like,
sounds cheesy.
well, I don't feel like this right now, but this is my
But
handwriting.
yeah, and I
Yeah.
did feel like that a few weeks ago, you
Yeah.
know, and just, you know, having those as sort of mantras for yourself.
Can before you finish, I just
Yeah.
want to tack onto that this idea that I had, because this is something I kind of want to do for myself,
Mm-hmm.
is a similar idea but recording it as a video. That's like
Oh
a
yeah, that's
video
a good
to
idea.
myself. So like I actually write a script and I'm
Uh-huh.
or you know, I could
And you're
ad
like
lib it.
talking to
But I'm
yourself. Yeah.
talking to the camera. I'm
Uh-huh.
talking, "Hey future Ben, uh you know, when we started this, I know you felt really excited, but if you're watching this, you're feeling frustrated and
Mm-hmm.
you feel like you want to quit. And I'm just here to remind you not to give up, and here's why."
Yeah. I think that's a
That
great idea.
yeah.
And actually, I mean, it sounds cheesy, but psychologically, that's a huge, like, it does something in the brain. It's been proven through science to be helpful in therapy and, you know,
Mm-hmm.
writing letters to yourself and all of that.
Yeah.
Um, I was going to say, I have little like sticky notes. There's one that I put on there because there was a week I was struggling with something, and this is my third point in a minute is like find your people. But I was struggling with something, and I was talking with my people, and they were like, Rachel, you're the boss, and they were like, you need to put that on a sticky note. You are the boss, and so I like, you know, I had to put it, and it's up there on my
Yeah.
on my thing. So when I forget, I can look up there and it says, you are the boss. You know, I think it says you are a badass boss or something, but
Yeah.
but so the third thing I always tell them is to find your people. So because creative work is so hard, I feel like you need people around you who understand what it's like. And I'm not talking about just family and friends. I'm talking about like people who are in it. So for
Mm-hmm.
me,
Yeah.
I have a writing group. Um, every day we get on Zoom, and this was like during the pandemic we started it, and we're still going now. Every day at 10:30 we get onto Zoom and we're there writing together, and then at the end we come together and talk about the struggles that we're having. We talk about agent troubles, we talk about publishing woes, you know, all of these things because they understand where we're coming from. And that's like so hugely helpful in the creative world because I can talk to you all day long about my frustrations with things, but you know, and you're a very empathetic partner and everything, but you don't fully understand.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't get it the same
Yeah,
way that somebody who's actually published and gone through that whole process
exactly. Yeah.
gets it.
So it's helpful to have those people around
Mm-hmm.
you. And then the fourth is I always tell people to get therapy because therapy
Yeah.
can really help you work through some of those things, you know. Um, and I don't know, I feel like I'll never stop pushing that for creative people, because creative people tend to be emotional creatures anyway. You know, that's why our work is good, because we put so much emotion into it, but that can also be hard, you
Yeah.
know. And sometimes we need a professional to help us get through those sticky spots, you know.
Those are really great. And I think it kind of what you're talking about with emotion and the link between that and creativity. And a lot of times this kind of goes back to what we started out talking about. Our creativity can oftentimes flow from our desire to be worthy of acceptance, and um, our desire to find belonging,
Mm-hmm.
and our desire to prove to ourselves that we're good enough, and so one of the things that I think holds a lot of people back is that when they think about sharing something, making and sharing something, they're afraid that it's not going to be accepted, that people aren't
Mm-hmm.
going to respond to it the way that they hope they will. And then what does that mean, you know? Um, so I think it's really important to deal with that. But a lot of the focus is on what happens after you've made the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the things that can be really helpful is to find something in the process of creating, cuz I love sharing a video or sharing a song and seeing people respond to it and hearing how
Mm,
it's helped
yeah.
people or how it's inspired people. I
And
love
sometimes
that.
you never will.
That part of the process is like it's a huge motivator for me.
Mm-hmm.
But what I've also found is that there are parts of the process that I show up for just because I love doing those things. Like
Mm-hmm.
I editing videos, like sitting down and
Mm-hmm.
making the little cuts and the little adjustments to the timing and adding little graphics and like doing all of those super tedious things, maybe tedious for other people, but I have just fallen in love with that.
Mm-hmm. I feel like that goes back to like purpose and mission. Mission is different because it's outwardly focused, but purpose is like, when I'm writing, I feel like it's what I was born to do, you know, because I love it so much.
And I think you can, for a lot of creative things, you can ask yourself the question, like, if I never shared this, is this something that I would still show up to do?
Mm-hmm.
And I think for a lot of creative things, you can find something for which that's true. Um, and when you do, and this is part of kind of creative exploration, but it's funny, you take the emphasis off of actually sharing the thing, but when you fall in love with the process, you you end up just making things.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I think, that like the place where I am today is I love the process so much of making things that
Yeah.
it's become a habit. It's
Mm-hmm.
like I can't stop making
Yeah, you
videos.
can't not do it. Yeah.
Um, it's also my job, but 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 that's, I think, one of one of the things that helps me the most be persistent is
Mm-hmm.
that I've found things that I really love about just the act of creating,
Mm-hmm.
not just the sharing part of it, but the doing part.
Well, and you also make videos that you're not paid for, so you can't just say
Yeah,
it's all your job. So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, that's true. Um, and and that's a really low stakes question. It's like, okay, I'm gonna start doing this, and I'm not worried about, like, are people gonna like this? Is it gonna be good? Like, I'm not worried about any of that. The only question you're trying to answer is there a part of this process that I will fall in love with? And letting yourself be open to that, to answering that question. And it's like you have nothing to lose. Like the worst case scenario is you try something and you're like, yeah, I just didn't love it.
Yeah. Well, that was a good experiment.
Yeah. Yeah. So, all right. Well, I feel like we've satisfied
Yeah.
the intent of this topic.
Yeah. It's good.
But I'd love to, like if you're watching this on YouTube or Facebook or wherever, I'd love to hear your thoughts too.
Mm-hmm.
Both from maybe folks who have struggled to get started with or finish something, um, and folks who are, creating things all the time.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the experiences and lessons you've learned about persistence? All right. Rachel, where can people go to find you online?
RachelTolson.com, and I'm at Rachel Tolson on all of the things.
This we're in the lead up to the release of your third published book.
Yeah.
And
it's a crazy time.
Yeah, so I feel like it's appropriate to like plug that.
Oh, yeah.
And to do that consistently over the next few weeks.
Yeah.
But just, a couple of sentences tell people about this book that's coming and when and where they can get it.
Well, it comes out on May 30th, and it's a story about a 12-year-old girl who is seeing her father for the first time in 2 years. And so she's like all ready to impress him with her wit and her maturity. But he brings his new family on the road trip. And so it kind of plummets her mood, and she steadily, just plummets, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
I should get a better pitch in place.
Well, I put you on the spot. You're doing great. I put
mean,
you on the spot.
It's pitched as a, Judy Blume meets Barbara D, if you're familiar with any of those. But Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. It's kind of like that kind of book for a new generation, because in the story, she starts her period away from her mom and 1,000 miles from home, and the only person she has is her dad, and she can't tell him. So it's one of those stories where it's a very emotional story, but it's also very funny. So
yeah, it's a very good story, and speaking from somebody who's not biased at all, but no, it is really good. Yeah, so you can visit
my website.
The website, I think it's linked there to. Amazon is probably where we have it pointing to.
Yeah.
But it's going to be available.
Well, it's at all your favorite bookstores, so they should have it.
Yeah, it's going to be available
use an indie. That's the best.
Yeah, hardcover.
Yeah.
Ebook and audiobook read by
Tara Sands. She's pretty phenomenal.
Who? Yeah, like you showed. They sent you like samples of 5 different voice. What are the audiobook readers?
Yeah, voice actors.
And
she was perfect.
She was your first choice, and you ended up getting her. So that's going to be excellent. Like, I can't wait. That's what I'm probably the most excited about.
I'll listen to it on audio.
Yeah. And if you want to find me, I'm at bentolson.com and at bentolson on all of the things. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. All right. Super duper quick after show today. The trash just showed up again.
Yeah. I was going to say, one of the things that I miss about your creative work is your vlogs.
Oh, yeah.
I really miss those. I used to love watching your vlogs.
Oh, see, we should have maybe gotten into some more of those examples, because the thing I'm telling myself is like, vlogs nobody's making vlogs anymore. It's not people aren't interested. It's more just like an ego project, and it's not a good way to grow an audience.
I feel like if I
all of these external internalized stories.
If I could do it, I would love to do something like that. I just don't have I don't have the artistic video eye and the editing. And
making vlogs is so fun. I mean,
I know, I remember you loving it. So
it's so fun.
Yeah,
it's probably one of my favorite
video
formats. Yeah.
Yeah, and short films and
I'm also really interested. in essay videos.
Oh.
I I've for a long time I've really liked the idea of just finding some random thing
Yeah.
and
Doing a whole
making
video about it.
a 15-minute video, like really diving into the history behind why
Dandelions
fire
love good.
hydrants
Oh.
are placed where they are,
Yeah.
and
Oh, yeah.
why they're that color and shape, and why they're
Yeah.
that distance apart. And
That would be fun.
yeah, it's just like it's one of those things where it's like as a kid you
Uh-huh.
have those questions where
Yeah.
you're like, why is this such and such, and
Yeah.
nobody really has a satisfying answer,
Right.
and you're just kind of like, okay, well, I guess I just won't ever know. um
Yeah.
so like
That would be fun.
just following my curiosity into
Yeah.
that'd be fun.
I mean, it could be a little bit of play, you know.
Yeah.
Play is always good for creative work, so.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. I mean, I've got a bunch of things that I want to do,
Yeah.
so I will die with regrets.
Aw, don't say that.
No, I actually kind of think of it as a good thing. Like
Yeah.
if I'm that excited and curious about so many creative things that like in a lifetime I will never
Yeah,
get to
it's
all
true.
of them.
I will never get to all my book
I feel
ideas.
like that's
Yeah.
better than the alternative of like, well, I've done everything that I
Yeah. I wanted to do. I'm good.
I'm
See
good.
you later, world.
no more ideas in this brain.
I think I have so many book ideas. I'll never get to them all. So the scary thing for me is like, did I pick the right one
Mm-hmm.
to write this time? You know, like, am I picking the right ones to leave?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, it's got to be tough. All right. Thanks again for tuning in, and see y'all next time. Oh, I wanted to. I'm
we won't
not
be
sure
here
if,
next week.
yeah, no live stream next
I have
week.
a book signing and I'll be out of town. So
I did want to shout out. If not sure if she's still here, but Melanie, thank you for tuning in. We also love this topic. I wasn't sure about it going into it, but I feel like there was a lot of really good stuff in there. So,
yeah.
But thanks, Melanie, and thank you all for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.